All right, guys, welcome to our second episode of Fivecast. I appreciate all of you guys, meaning you guys, you patrons, for your amazing feedback after the first episode. And I want to share some reflections, some wisdom, some lessons learned, and all that kind of stuff. So I felt like in the first Fivecast, I didn't know who the hell I wanted to be. I was like oscillating between this hyper serious Walter Cronkite style news reporter and this hyper satirical weekend update type of funny guy. And you guys might not know this because you never sat down for an official newscast in a green screen studio. But when you're staring into a camera, it's kind of like a fork in the road. On the left is be a funny guy that everyone likes to laugh with. And on the right is be a very serious genius. But I'm not a comedian or a scientific researcher with too deep of a political science understanding. So I'm just going to split the difference and be myself. Today's not really an episode, but it's more of some parting reflections after the first go around, and I really appreciate you guys like being the incubators for some new, fresh, good ideas. It's trying new stuff that gets me excited. It makes me want to get up and go to work every day. So shout out to the real patrons on the damn internet front lines keeping the shit moving. So another kind of big lesson I learned came after I clipped out some of the different parts of that particular Fivecast onto the YouTube channel called Channel 5 Clips. We usually like use that channel to break clips up and try to get people to watch the main videos on the YouTube channel, but in this particular instance, I broke those clips up to see how the public would respond to it. So I had 3 different clips that I posted for a very brief window on the Clips channel. I had a clip talking about Trump's acquisition of Greenland. I had a clip talking about the peace talks between Trump and Zelensky about the Ukraine-Russia ceasefire or soon to be ceasefire. And then I talked about the P. Diddy related court claims made against the Atlanta comedian Drewski. And I kind of just wanted to see what people liked, what was landing. I came back the next morning after going to sleep and I saw that the Drewski clip had 25,000 views and like hella different comments, and the other videos had less than 1,000 views. And that kind of reminded me of something that I already knew, which is that drama sells a lot more than news, and that controversy and allegations and scandals about celebrities is something that the public has an insatiable appetite for consuming. And they actually seem to care more about celebrities and famous people getting in trouble or saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing than they do about international news events. And I'm not going to comment on the specifics of like the Drewski situation, but I realized in that moment, after dipping half of a toe into the online controversy economy, that I never wanted to do that again. And so from here on out, I'm establishing an official 5 cast rule that is thanks to you patrons. No celebrity drama, no gossip, nothing. I don't care what happens to Taylor Swift or Travis Kelsey or Terrell Owens or Donovan McNabb or Chase Utley or Shane Victorino or any former Philadelphia baseball player that I can think of. I'm going to focus on the real news. What the hell's really going on? Not in the hills with these BS ass famous people, because the famous aren't particularly interesting. I mean, I don't mean that as a disrespect to some cool famous people out there, but in my experience, once you've passed a certain plateau of success in your life, all of your concerns become more or less the same. You know what I mean? Like, oh, like I don't want to be late to the Oscars. Oh my God, what is People Magazine asking me about now? Should I go to the Versace store or the Givenchy store? Those are not the concerns that the common person is thinking about. And I make this show for the people, para la gente. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm gonna divide the 5 cast into a couple different segments now. I want to start the 5 cast off with really positive news and then get into some undercovered stories that I personally find interesting. I've been subscribed to this news network called www.goodnewsnetwork.com. It's like a therapeutic resource for people who suffer from like clinical depression and are also addicted to news media. And psychiatrists give it to them, being like, you're going to be less sad if you read one of these, positive stories that come out every day. So I'm going to start the day off with 2 positive news stories. And then I want to take a deep dive into like undercover, dare I say, more blind spot stories. I mean, undercovered, like the Zizians cult, for example, I want to cover next. I want to bring on experts either in person at this physical desk or via Zoom to talk about what the heck's going on. Imagine like a mix between the Daily Show of old and like John Oliver and Channel 5. It's kind of where we're at. Okay, what else should I talk about? All right, I got some more positive news for you guys about Dear Kelly. Let me just take a sip of this Spindrift here. They haven't given us a sponsorship deal quite yet, but if you guys are watching this, if you guys are part of the Patreon crowd, spindrift.com/channel5. It could happen. Just help us out. One sec. So, Dear Kelly has been out for 2 months and 3 days, and we officially just passed the 50,000 rental mark. That means thanks to you guys, we have officially surpassed the HBO film in total revenue. Not gonna lie, I thought in the first half they definitely had us after the post HBO movie industry blackballing that seemed to occur for a few months, if not years. I thought I'd never be able to make a movie again, capital M movie, and I'd be stuck in this permanent purgatory of being seen as a capital Y YouTuber who makes premium content like the Nelk Boys that sometimes comes out on an independent website. But it's being reviewed by some real film critics. No Roger Ebert yet, but it could happen down the line, and I'm very excited. And I heard through my agent that the non-scripted department at a talent agency called WME, if you've heard of it, is curious about acquiring Dear Kelly for a licensing fee, meaning it could live on like Showtime, FX, Hulu, Tubi, or something for 2 years. They show it to the world. Then in 2027, I get the IP back and I drop it online for free. That's the plan. I hope it comes to fruition, but even if not, even if I'm still stuck down with the internet crowd, and I can never make it to the hills, it was worth it, man. Shout out to you guys. Hopefully, with that revenue, I'll be able to deal with the lawsuit, which I'm going to talk a little bit about more if things get worse. Yeah. So before we dive into the main deep dive that we're going to do about the Zizian cult, which we're probably going to film like later today, not in this particular newscast, I thought that it would be effective if we reviewed one of the videos that came out recently. So I dropped a video on YouTube yesterday called Anti-Ice Rally, and it covered, a rally that was organized in a neighborhood in LA called Boyle Heights, which is a very historic Chicano neighborhood on the east side. And yeah, it was not just an anti-ICE rally. It was to protest a variety of Trump's executive orders, some of which had to do with abolishing the asylum, suspending the asylum application process, and also designating the cartels as a terrorist organization. Now, I caught a lot of heat for this video from both right and left, which to me is the sign that I've made a good video. First off, by the right wing, by the MAGA crowd, I'm under fire for platforming anti-American perspectives who don't love our country and want illegal aliens to take jobs away from hardworking blue-collar American manufacturers. And on the left, I'm being under fire for bringing up the drug cartels in my conversation with the organizers because I was supposed to, I guess, only focus on the labor-seeking migrant issues. I wasn't supposed to talk about the actual situation at the border or the other executive order that Trump passed, but specifically just about ICE raids, which aren't even really happening in LA right now. I mean, they happened a lot in the past, especially with Obama. But from what I have read, there's only been a few different isolated incidents that occurred regarding deportations here in California, at least in LA. I know that in the Central Valley, there's been a lot. In Denver, there's been a lot. In Texas and Arizona and Nevada and New Mexico, there's been a lot, but nothing quite yet in California, which is a good thing. Yeah, so I want to watch this with you guys. And I want to establish something before we watch this, because this video has kind of a racist beginning. I obviously don't say anything racist, but there were some people who were kind of pocket checking me for being a Caucasian creature, a whitey out here in these Boyle Heights streets. Now, I'm not the kind of white person that gets upset when people say things about white people. I'm not like that kind of guy, especially when I'm in the field. Like if I were to go to O Block or like, back to North Philly, Kensington, and somebody was like, "What's up with this white boy? See the police?" I'm not going to have like a white guy freak out and be like, "What the fuck do you mean, brother? We all bleed red. Like, stop being like that." I understand that there's different societal subtexts that are occurring that could make someone believe that I am on the opposite team when I'm actually not. I am, in fact, in support of immigrants, both documented and undocumented. And at the time of this particular video, I had just come back from the El Paso Juarez border where I had engaged with a bunch of great conversations with Mexicans who live in Juarez about how they feel about Trump's designations. And so like I had this like fresh discourse that I had just had with people at the epicenter of the issue in my mind. And then I got to LA and like right off the bat, they were like hating on me for being a white boy. And so I think that kind of impacted like my lines of questioning throughout the video to where like when you go to a place and your intention is specifically to like make them look as good as possible, and then they see you and they just start hating on you, like, or like talking about how you're white and shit, it's kind of like disappointing because I was trying to make them look good, but I felt bad about omitting that. Like I wouldn't feel good about putting this video out there without first showing that they were like pretty hostile to me. But I hope that their points, the good points they made, were able to kind of shine through. But either way, let's get into it.
My family's from Mexico. I was born in Compton. I'm all for La Raza of Mexico. I would love to live in Mexico, but this is Mexico, so.
We built America. A lot of our farm workers are immigrants.
See, you guys are foreigners. You actually don't know how it is to have a taco de frijoles in the house. Nopales.
Does that make you a foreigner? You know what I mean? I mean, no disrespect, but like, that's like, imagine if I walked up and I was like, you ever had like a corn dog, you know what I mean? And like a funnel cake and got tickets to the baseball game. I don't know. I think he might have been talking about Boyle Heights because I keep watching this clip over and over. And I was like, does he think that those are like the only defining like characteristics of being American is like your mom making like tacos at the house? And I'm not going to lie. I don't have any evidence to prove this claim, but my mom did make tacos in the house back in the day. And she was vegetarian, so it actually was tacos frijoles in the house. But I wasn't about to tell him that, and I'm worried that if I say that, y'all won't believe me. But if my mom is watching, she can tell you she was making tacos. However, not nopales. I'm not even sure what that is.
Mole, queso, right?
Yeah.
You don't know. You don't know that richness. You're like a foreigner, right?
Right.
Are you? What ethnic are you?
White.
Oh, you are. Okay.
What are you?
Caucasian.
You're Caucasian?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
She does not think that's cool. Side note.
Even you, man, you know, being like, you're light-skinned, no, nothing racial or nothing, man, but we're all from where we're from, man.
I'm Mexicano.
Okay.
Yeah. People of the sun. See the people of the sun?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't have
You
any.
actually came and invade not you, but your ancestors, the Europeans.
Well, I don't know if the Irish did that, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? But this
Okay, so here's why I said that about the Irish. And like, I'm not one of these people who's like, I'm Irish. I don't have anything to do with the, historical oppression of any minority because like we had it hard in, after Ellis Island in the 1920s in New York. Like, I haven't ever suffered any Irish discrimination. But the point I was trying to make here is like, for one, my ancestors actually didn't have to do with the Spanish colonization of the Aztec Empire. But more specifically, especially like post-colonial Mexican history is so complex. And I was a New Orleans studies minor in college, so I wrote my like senior thesis about like post-colonial French colonies and Spanish colonies in the U.S. And I think that especially now with the pivot toward like indigenism that you see in some of the Mexican communities, it's interesting for them to trip on me about like my ancestors colonizing them because 90% of Mexican Americans are what would be described as of the mestizo ancestry, which is a mix between indigenous and Spanish roots. So technically, a lot, the contemporary Mexican ancestry blood type is a product of colonization in a lot of ways. So it's a bit misplaced, but I get what he was trying to say. And like, there is stuff for me to learn too. But if you want to go specifically into what happened in Mexico, and this is so interesting to me because Cortez arrived in Mexico almost 150 to 200 years before the Jamestown colony was established by the English. I think it was the early 1500s when Cortez went to the Caribbean, to Puerto Rico, where the Arawak people lived, and then made his way to Mexico. And it's the differences in colonial policy between the Spanish and the English that explain what the Mexican race is today and what the American race is today. And it's the reason there's actually no American race. Mexican as a race is a combination of Spanish and indigenous blood types. American is an abstraction. It doesn't exist. And the true reason for that is actually kind of dark, but it goes back to colonial policy regarding the enslavement of the indigenous people. So Spain had a policy called Economienda, I believe it was, when they conquered a territory. Instead of trying to exterminate the indigenous inhabitants, they would use them as a labor force. Whereas the English, have a different policy where they tried to drive all of the Native Americans of the East Coast, and they successfully did through the Indian Removal Act of 1830, onto the frontier. So the Trail of Tears, stuff like that, the Florida Seminole Wars were all about getting Native Americans away from the centers of commerce for the English. Whereas for the Spanish, they didn't see it that way. They preferred to enslave the natives, whereas the English preferred to import African slaves to the colonies. So did the French, like Haiti. English did that to Jamaica and also the American South, and pushed natives to the frontier. So it's because of these differences in policy that you have no American race. There's not, if there was an American race today that was like a Mexican race, it would be probably a combination between Native American, white, and maybe 10 to 15% African American. It would look kind of like Jacob from Twilight, but that's not the case. So what we see now specifically is with some of the Mexican diaspora in America, there's different ways you can go. Like when I was in high school, I there was some kids who were Mexican in my grade, and a lot of them would call themselves like Spanish. You know, like if you asked them like, "Yo, or, you know, where are you from?" They'd be like, "My family is Spanish," and they took a lot of pride in their lineage to Spain. Whereas I feel like in the 1960s, originally, you saw a pivot toward indigenism, which is sort of the belief that that is the important type of the bloodline that should be appreciated, worshipped, and incorporated into the worldview. And that was a direct result of a social movement that actually started in Boyle Heights. When people think about the 60s, they think about the Black Panthers and they think about the hippies, but they typically leave out the Brown Berets, who were the Chicano answer to the Black Panthers, who kind of came to fruition in Boyle Heights after the LA sheriffs murdered a journalist named Ruben Salazar at a bar called the Silver Dollar Saloon for no reason. And so after that, the Brown Berets became like a militant, armed organization that would protect the people of Boyle Heights from the police. And they were really into this concept that I could be botching the pronunciation, but it was called Aztlan, Aztlan. And it was this idea that the spiritual homeland of people in Mexico, you know, the Aztecs, was a shared spiritual homeland of the Native Americans of the United States. Because without the border, and if you look at the ancestry, especially if you were to compare like the blood types of Navajo Native Americans in Arizona with the Mexicans who live in the border states of Chihuahua or Sonora, they share like 60% overlap. So the idea of Aztlan mostly referred to the southern and southwestern United States, Arizona, New Mexico, California, even up to Idaho. And it was the idea that this whole territory was in fact is Aztlan, and those first two letters refer to the Aztecs. Now, of course, when the FBI infiltrated the Black Panthers in the 60s rather, with COINTELPRO, they did the same to the Brown Berets. And that organization still exists in small pockets, like I saw them during the George Floyd riots in Minneapolis. But the Brown Berets' presence has kind of gone away in most of East LA. But you can kind of still see the imprint of their worldview and their mythology still in the attitudes of people. So the point that I'm making is that, like, I don't want people to see this guy's perspective and think, oh, this guy's full of shit, he's got a victim complex. No, like, the Brown Berets who gave the people of Boyle Heights this perspective, they did have real struggles that emerged in the U.S., but they just kind of meshed them with a broader indigenous conversation and struggle. So let's keep going into it.
This is a continuous conversation. Yeah. And the important thing is when you have a conversation like this, it's a debate. It's agree to disagree.
Chinga la migra. Donald Trump es un pendejo. You guys might hear these phrases once a month or maybe once a year, but here in Boyle Heights, you hear that shit every day. I'm right here at Mariachi Plaza in the historic barrio of Boyle Heights to do a couple interviews. With who, you might ask? The organizers of a big-ass rally to protest mass deportation, ICE raids, Trump's new executive orders, and so forth. We're gonna go talk to la gente that organized this event and figure out ¿qué onda? ¿Qué pasa? What the heck is going on?
So specifically, I saw a bunch of comments yesterday on Instagram that were like, you picked out the dumbest people from this rally. The people that I talked to are the people who organized the rally. We talked to them on Instagram beforehand, and we organized this particular interview. Now, they are, in a sense, community activists, but they represent a socialist political party. So they are, I believe they are not from Boyle Heights, I'm not sure, but if they are, they're using this moment to have a rally to advertise and hand out literature for their leftist political organization.
What the heck is going on?
ICE is terrorizing our communities, and they're trying to manufacture consent for a war with Mexico.
All right, so that right there, ICE is terrorizing our communities, comma, they're trying to manufacture consent for a war with Mexico. So those are two different things. I'm trying to get to the second part of what she was saying. So the idea is that in Trump's executive orders, he's trying to manufacture consent for a war with Mexico. That's confusing for a variety of reasons. I mean, I do think that putting the terrorism label on anything is kind of sketchy. Like, for example, we put the terrorist label on Osama bin Laden, which gave us permission to kill him in Pakistan without even informing the Pakistani government of our operations. Also, I know they put the terrorist label on Luigi Mangione to be able to like do all these crazy optics and give him like a perp walk with Mayor Eric Adams right there. But I believe that Trump did that with the understanding that the military would enact some kind of special operations in Mexico to destabilize the cartel. Now, I don't know. It's hard because is that a war on Mexico? Because Mexico is also a pretty vast and complicated country. It's actually called the United States of Mexico. And the places in Mexico where a lot of this is happening is not Mexico City, is not Guadalajara, is not Oaxaca. The manufacturing hub of fentanyl is Sinaloa and Jalisco. And the two places where it's coming into the U.S., mostly three places, is Tijuana, Juarez, and Nuevo Laredo. So if there are special operations, I assume it would be targeting those particular areas. Or I could be totally wrong, and Trump could just be trying to, arrange a full-blown military occupation of Mexico. But to assume that before it's happened and to say that, no, he's not trying to target the cartels, he's actually trying to conquer and economically dominate Mexico, seems like a bit of a bad faith statement. So I kind of already was just like, what? Like, you think that the U.S. wants to go to war with the whole country? It's also confusing because Mexico also wants to eradicate the cartels, but they can't because the police forces in some of these towns are so compromised by the money. It's like, I kind of wish I hadn't just came from Juarez because I was thinking about this for like 5 days straight and like talking to Mexicans about the police corruption, like really trying to get to the meat and potatoes of the argument. And like just to come here and kind of get that two-dimensional take after being called white, like in a mean way, like 5 times, just sort of oriented me negatively. But I want to keep going.
And these raids are not hyper-targeting criminals, they're hyper-targeting tax-paying community members. And right now, with all the people not working because they're scared to get deported.
There's a lot of people that don't want to come out. They're scared to come out. They're scared to die out here. They're scared to get taken from these streets. Some of us are never going to get taken from here, so we're willing to die for those voices that are lost. We're here to speak and do for those that can't. My name's not C, backwards I can, and I do for those that can't. I can, so I will.
What the hell is he talking about? Did you guys watch this? Were you able to understand? Hold on.
Do for those that can't.
Trump has confirmed he plans to address.
My name's not C. Backwards, I can. All right, I can down backwards. My name's not C. Backwards, I can. His name is Nasi. Backwards, I can. His name is Nasi. His name is Nasi. His name is Born.
Backwards I can, and I do for those that can't. I can, so I will. And that's for everybody. If you can, do for those that can't.
Trump has confirmed he plans to address illegal immigration in the U.S. through a mass deportation program.
The stories of families being ripped apart, there's mothers that are being taken away from their children.
Sometimes you have to be careful just going to the street and getting ice cream.
This past week, a video went viral of a
Yo, why is that fool always talking about food? Like every time I interviewed him for like 20 minutes, and I could put the raw footage out, but like almost every metaphor he uses has something to do with food. You know what I mean? Moving on.
in Almonte who was violently arrested and detained by ICE in broad daylight. Her daughter has cancer and she's undergoing chemo right now.
Mother does not have a criminal background, and she's the primary caretaker for her daughter.
She is currently going through chemo right now, unable to walk, and she feels afraid and alone.
They're being ripped apart from the rest of their family and their communities.
We're being told rhetoric that the idea is going to be that we'll create more jobs for Americans if we take away the jobs of immigrants. But these jobs are open to Americans. The immigrants are often the people that are taking low-paying jobs that are being exploited for things that Americans don't want to do. And the issue of job availability is not due to the immigrant community. Many of
That's so true. And like, I really hope that people understand that point that I was trying to make there is that, you know, there's this narrative that the labor force that's American is being, you know, like kind of robbed by these immigrants who are working these jobs. But dude, some people, they pick like berries and shit in the fields and they make like, less than $300 a week. And I can't think of a single American who would want to do that job. I mean, I'm sure they're out there, but it's definitely far and few. I think Bill Burr said it the best though. It's not that Americans don't want to do the jobs. It's that the companies are unwilling to pay fair wages for those jobs. Like, I think Americans would, in fact, pick strawberries. I think a lot of the work that's typically done by migrants, especially on the farms in the Central Valley and in Washington, would be occupied by Americans if the employers were willing to pay, fair wages. A lot of this does come at the top of the food chain here, definitely is corporate greed.
These migrant workers come to the U.S. on temporary work visas. She has picked tomatoes in the summer, getting paid for each bucket she picks, at times only making $200 a week.
Americans are being squeezed out of the labor force and their jobs are taken.
It's ironic that this billionaire agenda is wanting to deport immigrants when they're part of the reason for their success, the exploitation of the working class, especially immigrants.
You know what other billionaire agenda is dependent on immigrants and the working class and migrants to expand their profit yield, infinitely? We're about to get into it.
An estimated 11 million people live in the US illegally, at constant risk of deportation, even while large parts of the economy depend on their low-paid labor.
Right, so for as long as I can remember, immigrant labor has seen as quote-unquote unskilled labor, which doesn't exist, right? All labor is skilled. And because of that notion, right, that the people picking our fruit, the folks cleaning up our hotel room, the people literally cleaning up debris, are immigrant workers, there's this notion that their labor is unskilled, therefore should be underpaid.
And you know who's being hurt the most by millions of people pouring into our country? The black population and the Hispanic population.
It's easy to criminalize people without taking responsibility for why we have immigration and immigrants in the first place, which is due to U.S. intervention and us intervening in the global south and forcing people to leave. People don't choose to come here lightly. They are forced to.
This country has fucked up the rest of the world and destroyed people's homelands and forced millions of people from the Congo to Latin America to flee their homelands and seek refuge in places like the U.S. And then they turn around and call them criminals and demonize immigrants.
We not cross the border crossed us. They stole Mexican territory. It's us territory. But Trump...
And like I was saying before, it wasn't necessarily a theft in the same way that the Americans stole Native American land and tricked them with false promises and lies into leaving where they came from. The Mexican-American War was waged between the forces of the newly emancipated Mexico, who wore Spanish, and the American armies, and resulted in the acquisition of the West Coast for the American frontier.
But Trump is crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy motherfucker, though.
Even right now in Mexico, I think by labeling cartels a terrorist organization, Trump is trying to manufacture consent for war with Mexico. And that's what they've done across Latin America.
So there's several things here that I'm going to get into in a minute. And like, I don't want to rag on anybody, but like, I know that these people sent like a bunch of bots to hate on me after that. And like, the reason that I went into the cartel topic wasn't because I was like desperate to shift the narrative or create some equivalency by saying like everybody who like is anti-ICE is pro-cartel, but they were the ones grouping it together. It was, we hate ICE and the cartels are being exaggerated and they are being put in a position where they have no other choice but to make money by any means. And you'll see that here.
2 weeks ago, I officially designated this gang, along with MS-13 and the bloodthirsty Mexican drug cartels, as foreign terrorist organizations.
La Familia Michoacana has terrorized areas outside of Mexico City for decades.
How do you feel about the designation of cartels as terrorist organizations?
So I asked this like after they'd already brought it up, just to clarify.
I would say that when it comes to cartels, even that alone and those questions, it's shifting the narrative to that the immigrant community that are coming to the United States are all cartel-based or are all dangerous.
I'm not talking about migrants doing crime. I'm talking about criminal organizations taking advantage of the smuggling routes into the U.S., not the migrants themselves. A lot of them are taking advantage of migrants who are passing through Mexico.
The criminals stamped their skin to signal they had paid The kids were marked too.
And as they wait, many are being kidnapped by smugglers connected to criminal organizations and held in stash houses, where they are tortured until a family member in the U.S. or back in their home country pays a ransom fee for their release.
Do you feel like that's a responsibility of the Mexican government to root out that corruption in some of the border states, or should it be something that America does?
And the point I'm trying to make there is that like a lot of this corruption isn't endemic all across the country of Mexico. Like much of the corruption that you see that allows the drugs to come into the US has to do with like specific municipalities and states like Baja California North and the city of TJ, or the state of Chihuahua and the city of Juarez, or Coahuila and Piedras Negras. Like a lot of these are very specific, compromised, small cities. So the question I'm asking is like, okay, if the president of Mexico isn't going to do anything to secure the U.S.-Mexico border, is it our responsibility as a government then to make sure that drugs stop coming in, or should that be a collaborative effort?
I think that that when we're fighting for improved immigration reform and to create paths to citizenship, that the discussion has to be separate from identifying the solutions to manage the infiltration of crime within our country.
It would be fantastic if those were separate conversations. I wish that there wasn't even an overlap between talking about undocumented people receiving asylum status and the cartel making billions off of fentanyl, but unfortunately they've seized the market, so that's why these are together. It wasn't a Republican talking.
The president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, has done a really good job by debunking a lot of the rumors of, the cartels and the criminal organizations.
What does that mean? Debunking the rumors? How do you do that?
Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum responded firmly, stating that Mexico would never accept any interventionist actions, emphasizing...
No, I'm not going to say that the president of Mexico is paid by the cartels, because that wouldn't be cool to say. But I'm just going to say that a Mexican official going on TV and saying, like, don't worry about the cartels is not evidence that it's a manufactured problem.
Collaboration without subordination.
247 homicide victims in the first 2 weeks of Sheinbaum's administration.
It's a narrative, right? It's a narrative that paints immigrants as criminals. And that's what the Trump administration is going to continue doing.
Because it helps make the community afraid, make working class people afraid, so that there's an easier transfer of wealth to the billionaire class.
The billionaire class, they already have the money. They don't need any type of transfer of wealth. They've got it already. If anything, I mean, that's what's kind of frustrating is like, the billionaire class is not actually worried about their capital being threatened. I think this much more has to just do with Trump simply getting votes for himself. I don't think that like the billionaire class is like, we need to make sure that the migrant issue takes center stage here. I'm sure it's a helpful distraction for them to get the average person Trump voter riled up, but I think that it has less to do with the billionaires and more to do with just Trump himself and his campaign platform.
Because the reality is that America, we are the consumers, so anything that comes here...
We're not the only consumers of fentanyl and cocaine and all those drugs. It's a huge drug problem, a huge opiate crisis and meth and fentanyl crisis in Mexico.
Whether it's guns, drugs, we are essentially allowing them and making it a demand.
It's not the people of Mexico who are using fentanyl or at higher degrees, right?
Why? I mean, look, I actually like this lady in particular, but like, why would you be smiling when you're talking about this? Like 150,000 Americans have died in the past 4 years from fentanyl-related overdose deaths by a drug that was packaged by the cartel and shipped here for us to do. Like, it's really sad and depressing. Like, I'm not saying like, maybe I'm just like brain fried because I've lost so many people from fentanyl like in the past couple years, but like we literally know where it comes from. It doesn't just come from thin air, and nobody asked for it.
It's not the people of Mexico who are consuming these drugs. It's the people in the United States who are the main consumers.
Kids as young as 11 years old recruited by the cartels to smuggle drugs.
Federal agents say that they have freed nearly 100 migrants into Mexico who were being held against their will after a weeks-long human trafficking sting.
Sure, I mean, I'm not saying I agree with them and their violence, but I feel like they are pushed into a corner of survival. And when you're pushed into survival mode...
When you're pushed into survival mode, what you have to do is you have to take a razor blade, you have to cut somebody's face off, and you have to wear it.
You know, people do what they have to do to survive.
It's a 40-millimeter grenade launcher.
It's a lack of opportunity that disallows them to get certifications or to get certain education, things of that sort.
And, you know, when we talk about violence,
9 bodies hanging from a bridge in Mexico City.
I think it's important to also remember that just because they may inflict physical violence,
because they may inflict, like, I mean, just the language, like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have been the one to cover this, but like, just because they may inflict physical violence, there's no may. It's just happening.
like the U.S. commits a lot of violence in other ways to us and to other countries, like whether it's denying people health care or, you know.
All right, now I'm going to introduce.
All right, so I feel like I'm losing my mind. I feel like I was losing my mind when I was filming this, so I made this segment.
It's a segment for the first time that's called Theory versus Reality, where we take relatively bad faith statements that are made by passionate Americans and follow them all the way to the source to get the real scoop. Now, what you just heard was the undermining of the very real danger and threat posed by the Mexican drug cartels, and the unfortunate grouping of that assessment as being part and parcel of Trump's anti-migrant sentiment.
It's a narrative, right? It's a narrative that paints immigrants as criminals.
I believe that it's this unnecessary intersectionality imposed by reactionaries of all kinds that most potently obscures issues to the point of shutting down the conversation. Because the underlying message in that is that if you're critical of the actions of the drug cartels, you're playing into the anti-migrant sentiment, which in turn makes you racist. But thankfully...
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit here, expand on this a bit, because it's kind of the social pressure that is part of the reason that the left in general has had such a hard time mobilizing and creating, numbers. On the right wing, and I've said this before, there's vast ideological differences between people on the right. You have people on the right who are like weed-smoking, libertarian, gold standard Ron Paul listeners mixed with like pro-life evangelical Christians, and they pretty much disagree on every single thing, but they're able to set aside their differences and not tear each other down because they believe in a common purpose. Now you have, unfortunately here, people who are associating being critical of the cartels, which is a huge problem, especially for migrants, as being something that is inherently anti-migrant because Trump also said that. So they cling to these repeated talking points and then assume they're kind of all in the same basket. And the thing that's crazy is, I'm going to keep it real, I think that a lot of the people there don't actually believe what they're saying. I think that a lot of them really do think the cartel situation is fucked up, really do believe those things, but they know that if they go outside of the sort of like the narrative that's being, I guess, sent from the top, or kind of they don't hit every agreeable talking point bar for bar, it opens them up to reputational risk because it's like, all right, cool, there's that guy. He's cool, but do you see he was talking about the cartels? And someone's like, really? And that's enough for someone to be like, all right, I don't want to be on the outs of these people. I want to have friends. Their social life and status is kind of tied into these, movements. And so, and you will be ostracized and exiled by a lot of these people if you deviate from a particular talking point. Like, I'm just imagine if you're in one of these leftist circles and you reveal yourself to be like pro-life or have some kind of perspective that goes against the narrative, you're kind of instantly thrown out. And where do you go? You go to the right wing because they will take you with open arms no matter where you come from. And that's why they've been able to recruit so successfully, is they're like, fuck it, I don't care where you're from, what you think. Do you love Trump? Come hang out with us.
I don't care about that, so I'd like to explain a few things. The cartels and the migrants are two separate entities. Migrants come from around the world to find work and safety in the U.S. The cartels are billion-dollar corporations that pump drugs into the U.S. However, 95% of the time, migrants pass through Mexico on the way here, which gave the cartel a huge new business opportunity.
They've actually expanded. They're into kidnapping, extortion, weapons smuggling, and the scariest of all, human smuggling,
which accounts for a bulk of the revenue.
50,000 people times $8,000 a head is $400 million.
Following the motto, no one crosses without paying, the cartel often stages mass kidnappings of babies from their migrant mothers to demand huge ransoms.
Me llegaron casi a secuestrar a mi hija, pero pues con la bendición de Dios, el Señor, no sé, se le abrió el corazón y me la dio.
According to Ruben Garcia, the director of a shelter called the Annunciation House in El Paso, this often happens even after they've already crossed.
We just received a mom from Guatemala. She came up with her
4-year-old daughter with a smuggler in Juarez. The smuggler sold her to another smuggler, and that smuggler took her 4-year-old daughter and then took mom to where the metal fence is. You'll get your daughter once you're on the other side. Here's a cell phone. It was a way to get a lot more money. When she got to Border Patrol, the Central Process Center, there they took her to get a medical checkup, and she was able to get one of the officers to listen to her, who then called Homeland Security investigation. She had a cousin in Florida that had helped her with some of the money. They set up the meeting in Las Cruces, and there they showed up. They made the arrest. They had the 4-year-old. They also had a 6-week-old baby.
You know, people do what they have to do to survive, and
we need to look at our role.
Additionally, Americans are not solely to blame for the mass flooding of our streets with fentanyl. It's fair to say that American pharmaceutical companies like Purdue Pharma, which is founded by the Sackler family, are responsible for helping to create a generation of Oxycontin and Percocet addicts who later would create a demand for cheap synthetic opiates that was met by the cartel. But in 2023, the Sinaloa cartel, a corporation, did work directly with Hanhong Pharmaceutical Technology, a Chinese research corporation.
Which, by the way, is funded by the Wuhan Institute for Coronavirus Research. I didn't put that in there because I was like, if I fucking say that, I'm toast. But if you look it up, it's owned by the Wuhan lab. Really makes you think. I'm not going to say what it makes me think because I like having an active YouTube channel. I'm not going to go Alex Jones. But if you wanted to create some correlation causation right there, you could definitely do it.
To create, or invent rather, a powerful line of mass-produced fentanyl pills called blues. Here was the scene on the streets of Albuquerque, New Mexico in 2023, months after the blues hit.
Overnight, it seemed like the blues came in.
Yo. So like, I got to tell a secret story behind this footage. So like, this is when I was trying to overfilm during hiatus. So I was like sending all of my homies to make random shit. So I sent Juan to Albuquerque, and I was like, Juan, you need to make a documentary about fentanyl in Albuquerque. And like, all he brought back was like the interview with this guy, some other fool at a gas station, and this harm reduction guy with a Church of Satan satanic temple beanie. And I was like, this is useless. This is not a video. And then, you know, thankfully I stored it in the archive, and now it's seeing the light of day. So shout out to Elliot and Juan.
See everybody that like I knew that was getting high on just the heroin.
Uh-oh, ground news advertisement. Sorry, Patreon. You guys got to watch this advertisement. Okay, we're back to
Go to the pills, like their whole lifestyle changed.
10 years ago, the flavor of the month was heroin, right? Right now, that's all shifted into fentanyl. You know, the junkie's dream. Give me the strongest stuff possible. Take me to the edge of death.
The fentanyl has just really fucked people up, you know what I mean? It's taken a lot of people's lives. I mean, it's almost taken my life a few times, you know what I mean?
The synthetic market is getting bigger, and it's not going to stop. They have figured out, like, hey, if we can manufacture fentanyl in these little pills and sell it for $2 a hit, what else can we manufacture into a little dose and sell it super cheap?
In that year.
So the point I'm trying to make with that whole segment is that, like, there have been things that the cartel has done that go way beyond economic necessity and like survival. Like they are a corporation who is thinking of ways to poison the American public on more potent and powerful shit every single day. You guys remember the video of Philly Streets, right? Trank, they thought of that too. They're the ones who sold it to the Trank brothers. So pretty much like it's not like it was in the 80s where you had like planes that are bringing, you know, weed and cocaine to airports in Miami and California. Like this shit is taking on a whole different level, and they're purchasing the precursors for fentanyl from our, I guess, mortal political enemy, the People's Republic of China or whatever. So I'm just saying, like, I don't know. It feels crazy because like I've heard conservatives talk about this for so long and be so negative about migrants, and it always made me feel like they were lying. And then I've heard so many liberals be so positive about migrants and undermine cartels. But I think the truth here is like right somewhere in between. And I think it's possible, very possible, to be anti-fentanyl importing and pro-undocumented migrant. And hopefully you guys are on board with that.
Alone, 2023, 74,900 people died from fentanyl-related overdose deaths by a drug that was maliciously packaged, marketed, invented, and imported by the cartels. I think that terrorism in general is a strange label to slap on a group whose primary goal is to make money, but it's definitely not that far off. And the reason I'm going so in-depth is because when people are discussing an issue that doesn't immediately concern them and their safety, it's easy to pivot the conversation toward meta talking points about the causes of addiction and the implications of US intervention in Latin America. But this issue really matters, especially for the people of Mexico, not Los Angeles, whose lives have been torn apart by cartel violence. Here are some different reactions to Trump's new executive order, this time from Mexicans who are currently living in the epicenter of that kind of cartel violence, the infamous but beautiful border town of Ciudad Juárez. ¿Qué piensas sobre eso?
Creo que está bien la clasificación porque pues son personas que hacen daño y que no se tientan mucho el corazón con algunas personas y estaría bien el título que les...
Conocer la verdad. Mataron mucha gente, niños, señoritas, violaban y todo. La gente todo llorando, la pobreza. Usted puede vender taquitos y le cobraban. Y si no daban la semana el dinero, lo mataban. ¿Qué es eso? Ahora hay puras drogas sintéticas malas. ¿Por qué andan tantos jóvenes perdidos? Y ustedes como cronistas deben de echarle ganas. No oculten nada, se lo digo con respeto. Sí. ¿Y sabe qué?
So think about this, right? This is a guy in Mexico who lives in Juarez begging me at the border, being like, with his pointer finger out, being like, do not cut this, because he knows exactly how the media likes to roll when it comes to cartels. He's looking at me, he's like, do not cut this shit, bro. This is real. I'm really living in here. Don't blur me out. Put me in this. This is everyday life for me. And now I'm being criticized by people involved in activism in, Los Angeles for giving a perspective to a real, person in Mexico living through this shit. So it kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Le voy a decir una cosa. Yo le pido a Dios por ustedes para que Dios los proteja. Porque ustedes andan en el peligro. En Juárez estuvo los Z, con el Salvatrucha. Con todo respeto a todos los emigrantes. Ahí se quemaron 40, aquí bajando 40 emigrantes. ¿Sí supo?
Well, nearly 40 people killed in a fire that broke out at a migrant shelter along the southern border in Ciudad Juárez, Mexico.
As a personal eyewitness, the man goes on to suggest that the tragic death of the 40 migrants across the bridge was not due to an act of protest gone wrong, but actually because a group of mostly Venezuelans refused to pay the cartel tax, and that humanitarian groups helped to engineer a cover-up out of fear.
Quedaron callados. ¿Por qué? Porque no les conviene. Fueron 40 vidas. A mí nadie me lo contó, yo lo vi.
El Paso County Judge Ricardo Samaniego saying migrants are desperate and immigration policies need to change.
Yo voy siguiendo Bukele. ¿Sabe quién es Bukele, verdad? Sí. Ese presidente ha hecho muchas cosas en nombre de Dios.
He said that his favorite politician was Nayib Bukele, the current president of El Salvador, who created a mega prison called the CCOT, or the Terrorism Confinement Center, to indefinitely detain the members of two gangs, MS-13 and 18th Street. Two gangs that began and continued to exist in the streets of LA, but took hold in El Salvador in the 80s after Reagan's deportations.
Is it possible to get a tattoo like this if you're not a gang member?
No, you gotta kill.
You gotta kill to get those tattoos.
Because 14,000 people are being held in CCOT without trial, Bukele has been under fire for human rights violations. Many CCOT inmates say they were unfairly targeted and profiled. However, this year, El Salvador is no joke 20 times safer than it was 5 years ago, and currently has the lowest crime rate in Latin America, which is something that many Mexicans admire.
Nayib Bukele incluso está haciendo muchas cosas buenas en El Salvador. El Salvador ya no es el mismo de antes, El Salvador está muy bien ahora.
Ahora Bukele lo están criticando muchos cronistas, porque hay que los derechos humanos. Sí, y cuando ellos andaban matando a la gente, es que por eso le digo, joven.
¿Piensas que necesitamos una cárcel para las bandidas en México como Bukele?
¿Por qué no? Si esas personas no tienen provecho.
Oh shit, that's something we got to cover soon, is Shen Yun, for sure.
Yo he sabido, yo soy seguidor de todos los programas especiales que hay en YouTube. Y ahí los entrevistan.
This guy subscribed to Tommy G.
No, yo maté 5, 6, 7, los violé y tantas cosas. Yeah. ¿Qué pasó? ¿A eso venimos al mundo? No, a eso no venimos.
By the way, the interviews that you just saw are from our
You guys are already there. All right, back to the streets.
Anti-ICE rally in LA.
So do you feel like the first thing that we should do?
So just to clarify, I know I went pretty in-depth on this topic, and I wasn't trying to dunk on these like protesters extra as fuck, but you can tell based on the attire here that they're trying to kind of engineer a a Palestine moment, if that makes sense. And yeah, free Palestine. But I'm just saying, you can kind of see here. You guys see the screen? She's wearing like the thing.
Is kind of make the path to citizenship easier on a large scale.
Yeah, confused.
In a way, yes. I feel that we have to look at who is applying for citizenship, complete thorough background checks, look at what they've been contributing to society, which more than often is just contributing to the commerce in society. And as far as border control and trying to control the infiltration of crime, I don't think that anybody is shutting down that discussion or wants the infiltration of illegal drugs.
Here's the thing: if there was a safer way, a more humane way, and a way that abided by international human laws for immigrants to cross, for asylum seekers to cross, there would be no need for the cartel to do that, right? They are definitely taking advantage of the fact that people have to go through extreme and risky ways.
Yeah, that's totally true, but they are doing it. So it's like we have to address the current situation at hand. Like it's easy to say, oh, if this factor changed, then we wouldn't be in this situation. But unfortunately, we have to deal with the current situation. So I think that what has to happen immediately is, for one, hire 1 million immigration judges. Like make it so the asylum line isn't 6.5 years for a wait. Hire a bunch of immigration judges, like throw as much money as you can to like make sure that our courts are functional. People who want to come here for a better life, who have no criminal record, can get immediate citizenship. Make that process fast. Simultaneously figure out what we can possibly do to make sure that even if people are coming in illegally, that they are not being trafficked and exploited by the cartel in the process. If those two things happen, there wouldn't be a migrant crisis.
Of getting here, because there is no other way, right? So if we want to support and protect immigrants right now that are literally stuck at the border, right, because we've been cutting back our asylum system so much, we need to make the process more humane.
Thousands are gathering along the National Mall. They're calling for action from Congress and the White House on immigration reform.
Yeah, so the last time we had immigration reform policy was under Reagan, and it was a blanket amnesty.
I believe in the idea of amnesty for those who have put down roots and who have lived here, even though sometime back they may have entered illegally.
Reagan granted amnesty to immigrants, right? And
you know what's the funny thing about that? The only reason that Reagan granted amnesty to immigrants was like we didn't have a border crisis at the time. And it was so that people who were in communist countries who wanted to leave communist areas could come here. So that's the reason that so many people came here after Vietnam in a different era. And then many people came from Cuba after Reagan did that. So Reagan was trying to stick it to the communists and be like, are you living shitty in a communist country? Come here and you can become a citizen. So like, Reagan pretty much created the amnesty thing as we know it today.
Said is like, okay, if you've been here XYZ this long, here's the process to become a citizen, right? We're gonna grant you amnesty. There hasn't been a policy change like that in the immigration law since then, right? And you mentioned asylum, right? The current asylum process is extremely difficult, and unfortunately, for most families that do file their asylum claim, they will be denied.
So I think that's the best kind of claim that was made in the entire video. So right now, the wait time for an asylum hearing after you enter the U.S. is something like 4.5 years. And if you go to your appointment after being here for 4.5 years and they say, you know what, we don't really believe your asylum claim, we feel like you're just coming here for economic opportunity, not to flee persecution, you're going to be deported immediately. So a lot of people just never go to their asylum hearing. I probably wouldn't go either. So the problem when you have that delay is you say, all right, just wait in the U.S. and then we'll see if we're going to deport you in 4 years. It's pretty easy to get lost in the U.S., especially if you have no formal identification. Like I would just work somewhere off the grid, especially if the other option was getting deported. So that's a pretty good point.
And these are folks who are literally fleeing persecution, fleeing war,
Going back to Reagan too, he loved asylum because he had this policy, if you remember, called wet foot, dry foot for Cubans, because obviously our enemies are the communists. So he's like, if you're a Cuban and you want to defect to Florida, if you can get here by any means necessary, the moment that your foot touches sand, you're a U.S. citizen. No paperwork, they just give you a passport, like welcome in. And so it's interesting to see some of these conservative policies now backfiring to where they're claiming it's like a liberal policy.
All right, what's up, Channel 5 watchers?
Not going to make you guys watch the Ground News fucking advertisement. Let's see what we do. It was a long ad, though. Ground News really sends me the long scripts. Gave me a lot to talk about. Lot of dope-ass news aggregate information. What else? I'm getting tired of this video. All right, I think I'm gonna wrap. We'll watch the end.
As I mentioned, because it's kind of, for the longest, was seen as that inalienable human right that we all have globally.
Yeah.
Right? So if folks are out there, I think The Donut King, I don't know if you've seen The Donut King, is a really great documentary about, in the past, we even supported asylum seekers in creating businesses.
Yeah. We did that for countries that had communist regimes. So, I mean, if he was Vietnamese or Cambodian, then we would have been like, yeah, come here, it's awesome. But if it was a rival capitalist country, we would never do that.
We supported them in relocating, right, and thriving. So there's been instances in the United States where we have supported asylum seekers, and where there's and where it was politicians that were supporting and pushing for more asylum systems and processes. Yeah.
I think one of the problems too is it used to be that if you wanted to seek asylum, you had to wait in Mexico, and you'd have an appointment with a U.S. Customs official who would give you an appointment, give you a temporary residence card, and you'd get in. Well, Biden changed it to where if you hopped the border, you would seek out a Border Patrol agent, and then you would be transferred to a shelter and then given an appointment in 4 years. So it's bad for the migrants. It's bad for
the migrants because they can't get their work papers until they're asylum.
The government.
Bad for the government because they are totally flooded with so much paperwork they can't even get to the people who have valid asylum claims.
It's a bad situation. I don't think it has to do with left or right. It's just migrant rights, period.
Yeah, and that's where I agree with you because, like I said, both political parties.
Wow, that really bridged really nicely. Both political parties are looking to create authentic social media content, and Turning Point USA is winning.
Have used immigrants and migrants as a scapegoat, right? They've used asylum seekers as scapegoats, and they haven't created a process that center humanity. Like when you look at folks seeking asylum, and I think one of the things Trump said his first administration, when he was getting called out on putting kids in cages, one of the things he said was well, who built the cages, Joe?
Who built the cages, Joe?
Let's talk about
who built the cages, Joe.
And it was the Biden administration, right?
En el tiempo que está el señor Trump ahorita, está deportando menos que el otro pasado. En el tiempo que está, comparan del tiempo que estaba Biden cuando empezó su presidencia y con deportado menos personas.
This guy knows what he's talking about. You can just tell by looking at him.
Yeah, la diferencia es, Trump está en las noticias, dijeron cosas enojadas sobre los migrantes, pero Biden y Obama no dicen nada, pero hacen la misma cosa.
Correcto.
They are two sides of the same coin, that it's the same enemy, and the target is to regress society.
I'm going to keep it a bean and 1,000 with you guys. I don't think they're two sides of the same coin, and I'm going to keep it even more 5 stacks. I feel bad for promoting Jill Stein during the 2024 election because she was big into those buzzwords like genocide, both sides of the same coin. And now motherfuckers voted for Trump, and look what's happening, bro. Like we're losing damn park rangers out here in the field. It's not good. So I kind of feel like that both sidesism stuff where everyone's like, it's just part of the same capitalist machine. Like, dude, unfortunately, the last person we had was Bernie Sanders, and he's basically blackballed. So let's just keep it real. It would have been better right now if Trump was not president. Everybody knows that. Social Security's being cut. Even the old people who voted for him are going to die at 71 because they can't, fucking afford a damn hamburger helper. But yeah, dude, I do agree though that, Obama and Biden were pretty rough on the migrants.
Definitely, back to a pre-immigration state.
Yes, towards white supremacy.
There we go again. Really? You think that both political candidates are trying to regress us to a pre-immigration white supremacist state? That's not true. I mean, I think that they're both probably in the same camp. They're definitely both representing deeply entrenched oligarchies that favor white power structures. But it's stuff like that where it's you almost wonder if everyone's losing their goddamn minds. What?
Definitely, back to a pre-immigration state.
Yes, towards white supremacy.
And I think that's why it's important for anyone who supports immigrants and also immigrants ourselves is that no matter who's in office, we need to continue to fight for our rights. Because we know that no matter who's in office, we're going to be attacked. And we're going to be seen as the enemy and be pushed as the enemy.
Channel 5 Live Worldwide.
I agree with that last statement.
Hollywood and Vine.
Fuck the authority. Channel 5 News.
Channel 55. We don't fuck with custers. And 5 is the best number.
Hey, what's up, guys? Oh, shit. Hey, man, thanks for that web link. It's really working. I don't know if you guys missed the memo, but we just dropped an entire feature film. That's right, a full-blown movie at www.dearkellyfilm.com.
DearKellyFilm.com.
It's an action-packed movie that revolves around the life and times of Kelly Johnson, aka Kelly J. Patriot.
Kobe Bryant was assassinated by the Quins.
Come here, Nazi, you're going to Guantanamo.
Oh my gosh, what did I do? Am I getting canceled?
The Democrats don't like you, they're gonna cancel you.
It documents his semi-estranged family and their attempt to pull him out of the rabbit hole.
Are you selling baby parts, yes or no? Don't tread on me! Don't even think about it!
I don't want to say too much, but it's a good movie. If you guys want to watch it, it would mean a lot. www.dearkellyfilm.com. It's available for rent and buy. You can rent it for $5.55, or you can buy it for $15.55.
www.dearkellyfilm.com.
Dude, I'm so happy I don't drink anymore. It's only been, 9 days of being sober, but like I just remember out here, like you can just see it in my face. I was like 6 beers deep, like throwing up in my mouth on the way to this shoot. I was throwing up in my mouth because I was running too fast, and I just like started throwing up. You know what I mean? Like I hit a stride. It was cold. I just started puking in my own mouth. But I'm happy, dude. I feel good. I aside from sobriety, I'm excited about the movie. I'm excited about this new video too. This fool Mero from Zizians texted me last night, and he was like, "Man, that video was sick as fuck. Don't listen to the haters." Shout out to everybody. Even shout out to the organization for letting me come to that event. Sorry I didn't cover it the way that you guys expected me to. I didn't plan to talk about the cartels. I didn't plan to go on such a deep dive whole tangent, but I felt like I had to because it was being brought up without me asking about it. Anyways, that's going to conclude the second episode of 5Cast and 5Cast 3, which is going to happen in a couple days. We're going to get into the Zizians cult. That's right, the vegan, rationalist, insane string of murders that occurred from Vallejo all the way to Vermont. Thank you, guys.